Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Maciste in Hell. Now, Maciste in Hell is a silent Italian fantasy horror film directed by Guido Brignone, I probably butchered that, and loosely based on Dante's Inferno. Released in 1925, this features the character of Maciste, played by Bartolomeo Pagano. I probably screwed that up as well. Now, this character first appeared in the 1914 silent film Cabiria, and between that movie and this movie, Macistes appeared in 23 other movies, and there were 2 more Maciste films that came immediately after this, and the series was rebooted in the 60s, and in that series, Maciste was played by multiple actors. Now, from what I can tell, there's no actual continuity between any of the Maciste films. For the most part, they're all standalone movies, especially considering the first movie, I think, is set in ancient Rome, whereas this movie appears to be set in either the late 19th century or early 20th century. Honestly, it could be set in what at the time would have been present day, the 1920s. Now, I already reviewed this movie way back in 2016. My old review is still up, however, it's no longer public. It's now marked as unlisted, but I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can check out my 2016 review of Maciste in Hell. Although at the time, I kept pronouncing the character's name as Maciste. I kept pronouncing it as Maciste in Hell, because I didn't know how to properly say the character's name, but I'm pretty sure it's Maciste, but I could be wrong on that. Now, I have Maciste in Hell on this box set called Nightmare Worlds, which is one of those 50 movie packs from Mill Creek that collects 50 different public domain movies. However, the version that's on the Nightmare Worlds box set is actually a highly truncated version of the original film, but I did manage to see the complete uncut edition of the film on YouTube. Now, even though I do have a lot of nostalgia for the shorter version of the film that's on the Nightmare Worlds box set, I do recommend checking out the uncut edition, just because it's a much richer experience, and it's arguably how the film was meant to be seen. The only issue you might run into is the uncut version of this film on YouTube. Most of the versions I found, the title cards are all in Italian. It was actually very hard for me to find a version with English title cards. Now, I have not seen any of the other Maciste films, but like I said, from what I can tell, none of the films are properly connected, so it really doesn't matter that much. Like, you can view this purely as a standalone film, which is how I'm reviewing it. And as a standalone film, this is actually one of my favorite silent films. While it might not ever be as well known as stuff like Nosferatu or Hexen, it's still a film that I think people should check out if you are a fan of cinema from around this time. And visually, I think the film is beautiful, especially some of the set designs and the costumes. Like, for the time, I could imagine this was seen as being pretty spectacular. And of a lot of the silent films that I have seen, I think this is the one that I've seen the most times, even though I wouldn't say it's definitively the best silent film out there. So, the plot of Maciste in Hell is the demon Barbariccia. I'm not sure if I'm saying that demon's name right, and he actually is a character from Dante's Inferno. He's the leader of a band of demons that Dante and Virgil encounter in the 8th Circle of Hell. But he's sent to Earth to corrupt the soul of Maciste, this kind, virtuous man with almost Herculean strength. But Maciste refuses Barbariccia's temptations. Now, while the film is ostensibly based on Dante, a lot of the first half also borrows heavily from Goethe's Faust, with Barbariccia essentially playing the role of Mephisto. Meanwhile, Maciste is also trying to defend the honor of this woman he knows who recently had a child with this sort of aristocrat, but the guy is not really taking responsibility for the baby, and Maciste is determined to make sure this guy does his duty. Now, this subplot is a lot more detailed in the original cut of the movie. The version of the film that I grew up with that's on the Nightmare Worlds box set does cut out a good portion of... Honestly, it cuts out most of the first half of the movie, but as a way to get to Maciste, Barbariccia kidnaps this woman's baby, but Maciste does save the child and then does battle with the demon, but then Barbariccia takes him to hell. And in hell he encounters Pluto, who in Roman mythology is the god of the underworld. Now, Roman mythology does borrow a lot from Greek mythology, and he essentially is the Roman equivalent of Hades. Now, Lucifer actually does show up in one scene in the movie, and it's very much based on Dante's description of Lucifer, where he's frozen in a lake of ice and chews on the head of Judas Iscariot. But he only shows up in one scene, and it does not appear that he has a lot of say over what Pluto does. And for all intents and purposes, in this film's universe, Pluto is depicted as the king of hell. Eventually in the film, Maciste is seduced by Pluto's wife, who kisses him, and then turns him into a demon. Meanwhile, Barbariccia is trying to start a rebellion against King Pluto's rule, and Maciste, now armed with demonic strength, has to take part in this fight. But Maciste in Hell is a really fun movie. It's a film I've always enjoyed ever since I was a teenager, and I've always loved that very stereotypical image of a demon with, like, the horns and the pointed tail and the pitchforks. While it might be very cartoonish by today's standards, we gotta remember a lot of that imagery does come from Dante's Inferno, and a lot of the makeup effects for the demons I actually think looks really good. And while some of it is very hokey by today's standards, a lot of the set designs for Hell I actually think look quite beautiful. And I also appreciate some of the effects work in this movie. Like, there's a scene where Maciste punches a demon's head off, and we see the imprint of Maciste's fist on the demon's face, and we see the face regenerating, and they use claymation and stop motion. Yes, it's dated by today's standards, but it's still really cool to look at. But then you have hilarious moments when Maciste and this female demon ride on top of a dragon, and the dragon is so clearly a puppet and also looks kinda stoned. But yeah, I do recommend this if you are a fan of silent horror films. I think this is a very underrated one. Like I said, visually I think the film is quite beautiful. It has this ethereal, almost dreamlike quality to it, and I think it's a really good horror film and a really good adventure fantasy film as well. And once again, you do not have to be familiar with the Maciste character in order to enjoy this. This would also make a great double feature with the 1911 version of Dante's Inferno. Now, like I said, there were two more Maciste films that came immediately after this, but again, from what I can tell, there's no actual connection between any of the films, so I don't think those two were officially sequels to this. They were just other movies that happened to feature this character. But there was actually a remake of this movie, or at least a movie that used the same title in 1962, which was part of the Revival series. Now, for as relatively obscure as this movie is, supposedly Federico Fellini, who is one of the most acclaimed Italian filmmakers of all time, has said that this was the first movie he saw as a child. Also, scenes from this movie were included in the making-of documentary for the movie Little Nicky that's included on the DVD for Little Nicky. The documentary is called Adam Sandler Goes to Hell, and you can actually watch it on YouTube, and they do include scenes from this film in that documentary. Also, the band Gojira did an album based on this movie, so again, for as relatively obscure as the film is, it has had a small impact on popular culture. But yeah, that was my review of Maciste in Hell, and bye.